Good afternoon and welcome to Hudson Institute. My name is Peter Rao. I'm a senior fellow here and director of the Center on Europe and Eurasia. And it's my pleasure to welcome you wherever you are watching from, and to those of you who've made it here in person, to the struggle for freedom in Belarus with Andrei Sannikov. In 1995, Andrei Sannikov resigned from his position as deputy foreign minister in protest over a sham referendum put forward by Lukashenko to consolidate power in Belarus. Subsequently, he really became one of the leading dissidents and voices in Belarus. In 2005, he was awarded with the prestigious Bruno Kreisky Prize for service to human rights. And in 2010, he ran for president in a cooked election in which Lukashenko purportedly won over 80% of the vote. He thereafter led a peaceful protest in Minsk, his main square, for which he was physically assaulted, imprisoned, and eventually, after his release, he made his way to the United Kingdom. We're pleased that he's crossed the ocean to be with us here in Washington, in the United States. He will be giving some opening remarks today about the situation in Belarus and more broadly about Russia's regional ambitions and the prospects for political change in Minsk. And thereafter, he'll be joined in conversation by my colleague, senior fellow Todd Lindberg. I don't need to introduce Todd to you, to those of you who know our work, because Todd has reached a stage in his career whenever I mention a name from Central and Eastern Europe, be it a dissident, an opposition leader, a member of the government, where invariably he responds with, "I've known so-and-so for 20 years." And I think that applies in this case as well. So Todd Lindberg, thanks so much for quarterbacking this event. And sir, the floor is yours. Welcome to Hudson Institute. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and I'm especially pleased to be here with the help of Todd, because he's an old friend and he was also a very strong voice and supporter when I was in prison, demanding the release, not only me, but all of those who were imprisoned at that time. So thank you, Todd, for your continuous support for freedom fighters and for democracy in the world. You know, I was... When we all watched these tragic events of recent couple of days, this bombing of Israel by Iran, two things came to my mind, two very important factors, I would say. First is that there is a definite parallel between Belarusian situation and the situation of recent days, because if not for the regime of Lukashenko, there would not, I'm sure, there would not be an attack, massive attack on Ukraine in 2022. In other words, if Belarusians were resolutely supported during our revolution in 2020, there would be no such a regime. And there would be no this springboard to attack Kiev and to attack Ukraine by Russia. Same with Iranian attack. Iranian revolution was not supported. The world in 2022, the world was watching, monitoring, but not supporting. The dissidents and the opposition demanded strong actions against the mullahs regime when the women and then the whole population revolted. People were killed, and mullah's regime managed to control the situation, to stifle the process, and then it organized this horrendous attack trying to kill. Luckily, there were no victims. Second lesson, I think, that why it was possible to close the sky over Israel, and it is not possible to close the sky over Ukraine, because Ukraine demanded this kind of assistance for a long time, and it was not provided with this assistance. And the war in Ukraine is extremely important for the whole world, and the outcome of this war is extremely important for the whole world, not only for our region, not only for Europe. And I want to stress the importance of Belarus in the region as regards this war, because the war was prepared on the territory of Belarus only because we had the regime of Lukashenko. It started with the large-scale military drill in 2009, which was called Zapad 2009. It was the largest military drill in terms of scale, in terms of troops involved after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The scenario of this first drill was the nuclear strike on Warsaw and tank breakthrough towards Kaliningrad to cut off Baltic states from the rest of Europe. It continued during the drill Zapad 2011, 2013, 17, and finally 2021, when it was clear for us that the troops that are being deployed on the territory of Belarus were the troops that were preparing the war on Ukraine, and more specifically, attack on Kyiv. And it was possible only because Lukashenko provided the territory and has given the territory completely under the military control of Kremlin. It is still continuing today. So I think that regionally, Belarus plays a very important role, historically as well. I always refer to two factors to stress, to underline how important Belarus is. First one is chronologically, March 13, 1898. You probably don't know the date. It was the first Congress of RSDRP, which is the Communist Party, which was later renamed the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. The leader was Lenin. Lenin was not, it was held in Minsk. Lenin was not present there, but it was his party, which eventually created the totalitarian communist empire, which was known as the Soviet Union. Second day, also on the territory of Belarus, you might remember, 8th of December 1991, Vyskuly, dissolution of the Soviet Union, peaceful dissolution of this totalitarian empire, which happened on the territory of Belarus. So Belarus could be an example and a very good, very strong factor and catalyst of the processes in the region, both in negative and positive sense. Today, unfortunately, we are living through a very difficult period because there is a absolute unbelievable number of political prisoners in Belarus. You probably never had this figure even. It is about 10,000 political prisoners in Europe, in European country, in Belarus. What you might hear the number about 2,000 is what our human rights defenders managed to process because they simply don't have time and don't have enough information to process all these cases. And these people are not being kept in prison, they're being killed in prison. And no reaction from the world. No statements maybe, even no sanctions. We need sanctions, we need something strong against these regimes because I'm sure about that, and not only me, happily people in both in the United States, I read something in German and French press, are sure that if Lukashenko remains in Belarus, if Putin is allowed to remain in power, and even if there is some break in the war, some pause in the war, Putin will be preparing another attack in Ukraine because the goal of Putin remains the same. It's Kyiv. It's not Donbass. It's not Crimea. It's Kyiv. He needs to take the capital. He needs to show, to prove that whatever he is doing has some explanation and has some goals. And without this springboard of Belarus under Lukashenko, he will not be able to achieve his plans. So what is needed for us, what I ask our friends, more pressure on Lukashenko, more pressure on his regime with only one goal, to release political prisoners. Because since sanctions stopped to be introduced in full force, and since what worries me a lot, that sanctions now are mostly connected with the participation of Lukashenko regime in the war, and everybody forgot about the crimes against humanity that he committed in 2020, like killing peaceful demonstrators. And putting thousands of people in prison. I think that is wrong. And the fact that Putin was issued the arrest order by International Criminal Court and his accomplice Lukashenko was not, although he is clearly an accomplice in kidnapping Ukrainian kids from the territory of Ukraine, which are now then transported to Belarus and then to Russia, and from Donbass and from Ukraine in general. I think it warrants stronger measures. I now privileged to be member of Leadership Council of the newly organized World Liberty Congress. That's an organization that comprises about 300 dissidents from 53 oppressive authoritarian regimes. And we compare the notes, how these regimes are acting. And the notes are almost the same. And the inability of the free world to take measures against this regime is so obvious. I gave you an example of Iran attacking Israel, or Lukashenko regime used to attack Ukraine. But we can give a lot of examples, like from Venezuela. My friend David is here, hello. And from Nicaragua, from so many countries, Rwanda, Eswatini. We're discussing, and it is obvious that the free world has all the necessary leverage. Political will is lacking, and lack of political will led to the horrible situation, because according to the latest Freedom House report on the state of democracy in the world, which was just released, I think, the 18th consecutive year, we see a clear decline of democracy in the world. And the percentage of countries that are showing the decline of democracy and the democratic institutions is more than 50, and the improvement shows only about 20% of the countries. So I think it is important to take resolute measures today. And in our region, I guess I always stress, and I'm stressing once again, that it's a catalyst, it's a linchpin for the whole region, the democratization and progress in Belarus. It is doable. It is much more doable than people try to think. Just more pressure on dictatorial and more assistance to the democratic forces, and that will solve the problem. I will stop here. Okay? Thank you.
Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Well, thanks for that fantastic introductory statement, tour, not only of Belarus, but also of the region and the connection. I think I would like you to talk a little bit more specifically about the Lukashenko regime's role in the Ukraine war. It seemed to me that it's not something, frankly, that gets a lot of discussion around here. And yet, as you noted, there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes and sometimes close to the front lines. First question, I suppose, would be, where is Lukashenko in terms of the fight? Is he Putin's right-hand man? Is there any separation between the two at all? Is he prepared to do more and actually turn Belarus's role into a kinetic war? What do you think?
To be a right-hand man requires some kind of recognition of the personality. He's a puppet. He is Putin's puppet. He depends completely on his support now. Before, he counted on the investment and money from the West, and he got it. Today, he is completely under control of Putin, and it is clearly visible when Putin summons him at every moment, despite the state of health of Lukashenko, which is showing a lot of signs of serious illnesses. He was, I'm not sure even that he was informed about the beginning of this massive invasion in February 2022, but he did voluntarily provided him the territory and every possibility. What worries me today is that, people start talking, including in US press, what I can read, and think tanks, that we have to prevent Putin from pushing Lukashenko to enter the war. He is a full-fledged accomplice. He is a full-fledged participant of the war, because even if the missiles attacks from the territory of Belarus stopped for a moment, he is providing territory for everything, for repair of the military equipment, for providing hospitals for the wounded murderers of Russian murderers. He is taking part in the kidnapping of Ukrainian kids. He is doing everything, and he is happy that the reaction and the pressure is not as strong as it could be. I think we all know that there are more loopholes in the sanctions, both on Russia and on Belarus, than there are sanctions. And especially today, with the help of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, that they are helping to avoid the sanctions, I think it is quite obvious. So he will obey the orders because he doesn't have a right to say. He doesn't take part in the decision-making process. From one hand. From the other hand, it is always, they are criminals. They are not rulers. They are not, the heads of states. They are not statesmen. They are criminals. And that is why it is much easier for them, even though they hate each other, to agree on something, like something nasty like this war in Ukraine or the repression inside their countries. Then, unfortunately, then for the free world to agree on the measures against this crazy rulers in our part of the world. So I think that it is. Sometimes I hear that maybe Lukashenko is worth talking to because he can play some role, at least as a buffer zone. No, he will obey the rules. Unfortunately, we were warning our Ukrainian friends before the war that there will be war. But somehow they believed Lukashenko because he said, I will not allow to attack Ukraine from territory of Belarus. Exactly what happened on the 24th of February 2022. So it is, I think the situation for us, for viewing it from Belarus, it is clear. We have to get rid of this too. We have to help Ukraine any way we can.
There's been a kind of persistent view in Washington that there was some possibility of introducing an element of separation between Lukashenko and Putin, and that's one of those things, as Peter might have indicated, that we've been talking about for 20 years or so. And how do we get rid of that impression? It seems to be, you said there's a lack of political will, and I agree with that. But it's not merely a lack of political will. It's actually pushback. It's don't do that within our own government, within think tanks, within other provinces. And why? Because, well, maybe it's too provocative. Maybe there actually is hope. Maybe there is a possibility of distance. These are the things that one hears over and over and again.
I can tell you what is happening when the West is doing this, and I think you can find it in your notes from previous years. When there is an attempt to create a split and to talk to Lukashenko separately to achieve something, it always ends into providing Lukashenko with the money he badly needs. And he uses this money to increase repression on us, on civil society and on the opposition. Nothing else. He's not doing anything for the economy in the country. So, and then he becomes more dangerous because because that's what Putin needs. He doesn't want to invest much into Lukashenko, and he is very happy when Lukashenko is getting from the West. The most recent example before 2020 revolution in Belarus and 2022 war in Ukraine is when I was in prison. There were three distinct conditions that European Union put forward for the lifting sanctions against Lukashenko, and none of this condition was met. And when I was released together with my friend Dmitry Bondarenko, campaign manager from prison, the European Union considered that it will be enough. So Lukashenko is showing some improvement. And my friend and colleague Nikolai Statkevich was left in prison. He served his full term, and he's in prison again. And we haven't heard from him for a long time. So Lukashenko was very happy that because the sanctions were lifted so quickly after they were introduced in 3 years, the sanctions were gone, and he used this period to prepare the crackdown of 2020. And you also have to keep in mind, which is probably more important, that Putin is watching all that the free world is doing as regards Lukashenko very closely. And he is watching and measuring this attention span. And then the fatigue with the problem of political prisoners that emerges very quickly. And they are very well aware that the West will not be able to keep attention on the problem, especially the problem of human rights, democracy, for a long time. So I think you will be doing yourself a lip service if you try the old strategies. Let's think of something new, because the period today is very dynamic and many things are possible. It is very dangerous and critical from one side. But as we know, during the critical times, there are a lot of possibilities that were not used before.
Well, let's start talking about that. What's a good next step?
Sanctions, increasing sanctions, using the sanctions that were not used before. For example, the designation of special forces, and we call it Gubopik. This is the most dangerous military group today in Belarus, designating them as terrorists by European Union, by United Nations, by any international organization, human rights organization, demanding release of political prisoners, demanding visits. For example, Red Cross, American senators, European Union demands visiting prisoners in prison in Belarus, because we have about, 50, maybe 100 of people who disappeared, and for 1 year we don't hear anything from them. Of course, they will not be allowed to come. But make it publicly, create a campaign. It will be a pressure, because he still, Lukashenko, he still needs money from the West. He still is having some relations with the West. He's still having a trade. So make more public effort, which is not being made. Doctors Without Borders, they have to go there immediately, because there are cases, we hear from prisons that people are denied medical assistance when they are dying. And several people died because in torturous pain, in excruciating pain, because they were not given the medicine appropriately. It is something that we have to cry about. And at the same time introduce sanctions. I can also give you an example of for example, the strongest critics of Lukashenko regime in Europe are two countries, Poland and Lithuania. At the same time, they have the highest trade turnover with Lukashenko's regime. It's over $1 billion, which is not insignificant in this time of sanctions. So close loopholes, more sanctions, innovative sanctions, stop talking about the possible improvements before you reach something. You have some conditions met. And for me, the priority is, of course, saving people's lives who are now kept in prison.
And that's the objective number one in terms of the priorities that you're working on.
Yeah, because we have leaders of opposition are today in prison. Those who are capable of lead the country and organize reforms in the country, and if we, by our concerted effort and strong effort, will release them. I was previously asked the question, but will they stay? Will they continue? Yes, I know at least 100 people who will stay and continue their fight, and that is why it is so important. It's not just mere, people who were protesting for the first time in 2020. It's people who were fighting the regime of Lukashenko for 30 years, and they will continue till we win.
Is this going to be an effort that's primarily led by Poland, Lithuania, neighbors?
There, you know very well that without the support of the United States, it's not possible to organize any strong and comprehensive effort. So yes, Poland and Lithuania. Again, I'm giving you an example. Lithuania was very complacent about Lukashenko and was very trying to accommodate the regime in trade, in relations with the European Union, advocating more ties with him, up until the moment when nuclear station was built on the border of Lithuania. So let us not wait for this moment when there is a nuclear bomb ticking because it was built by Russia, and Russia is in control of this nuclear station in Ostrovets, and it is only 30 kilometers from the border, 50 kilometers from Vilnius, from the capital. So let us not wait for dangers and for threats to get stronger. Let us take preventive measures. Yes, and that will be the priority because it will be a game changer.
And what about Western Europe? Are you getting the support that you think you need from capitals there?
Not now, because now the war in Ukraine is overshadowing the... Look, I told you the figures, and people are always surprised to hear these figures about 10,000, and nobody knows about it. So it is complicating situation, for example, for our neighbors, Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and because of the war in Ukraine, because they are definitely affected by this war and very much affected. So I think that if we look at the situation from the perspective of the regional security, European security, and international security, I think it will be obvious how important it is to put this effort to get rid of dictatorial regime in the center of Europe. And Belarusian situation is much easier. I think it's much more manageable than even Ukrainian situation, because even if we speak about the times after war, it will require much more effort, much more money, and much more organization to restructure and to help Ukraine to rebuild itself.
Can Putin win in Ukraine?
No, no way. Even if imagine that Putin wins the war and occupies Ukraine, there will be such a partisan guerrilla movement. They will not be able to swallow Ukraine. They will not be able to swallow Belarus, let alone Ukraine. So it is not possible for him to win. It's not possible to go back to the whatever architecture of the renewed, reborn Soviet Union he might have in his mind. No. I think he's doing good. He's doing quite well. He helped Sweden and Finland to enter NATO, and I hope eventually he will help both Ukraine and Belarus to join NATO.
Okay. No, it's clearly a war ostensibly started for the purpose of cracking and destroying NATO. Seems to have had something of the opposite effect.
Yeah. And that is why I wanted to show you that I leave it for this is the book I published recently, Belarusian NATO, but you see that there are two flags, yeah?
Yeah.
Ukrainian and Belarusian. So These are experts from my friends and experts on international relations, on security, including former Foreign Minister of Ukraine Pavlo Klimkin, including former Prime Minister of Lithuania Kubilius, and especially my good friend Janusz Onyszkiewicz, who was Minister of Defense when Poland was preparing to join NATO. And the purpose of this book to start to prepare a roadmap for Belarus to join NATO, and also have arguments how important it is for both for Belarus to be in NATO and for NATO to have Belarus, because we have to, get rid of this balcony, which will always, which is under regime of Lukashenko is a balcony to threaten Europe, but under democratic rule it will be part of Europe and part of defense of Europe against Russia. So this is.
Who says we're not thinking big here at Hudson? Who says the dream is over? No. Well, do you have a specific message for our friends in Congress and the Biden administration? You've mentioned sanctions a couple of times. What else? Anything we else should be thinking about as well?
I think that it is also always the recipe. I mentioned that I'm part of this World Liberty Congress, and it is always the recipe: sanction the bad guys, help the good guys. And I think that it is not now difficult to understand who the bad guys are and who the good guys are. So I think that first, again, for the message is to do everything to save people's lives in Belarus, to release political prisoners. That is a priority. Then think of Belarus as the linchpin to the security in the continent, in Europe, and in general for international security, and help Ukraine any way you can to get rid both of Lukashenko and Putin.
Good. Well, we'll take some questions from the floor as well. And I think we have a microphone. Yeah. Just wait 1 second so we can make sure our folks watching from on stream. Yeah, please introduce yourself and go ahead.
No, thank you. Christian Forstner, Hans Seidel Foundation. And first, I want to give credit to you, Todd, and to Peter for directing our attention here to this region, and to hosting. Andrei, you are the face of Belarusian opposition, really, and a great fighter for freedom. Yeah, thank you for all the work you do. My question would be, how united or disunited is the opposition today? So if we dream on having a successor to dictator Lukashenko, so is it Tsikhanovskaya, Svetlana Veronika Tsepkala, or Masha Kolesnikova, the three ladies? So how united is the Belarusian opposition? And in light with this 2020, so Lukashenko, by all means, and we have evidence, lost the election. What should we have done differently to get the real president elected and in office?
Yeah. Thank you. Interesting to have to hear the offer to appoint president from democratic country. We will elect our president. So it is. I cannot tell you the name. This united opposition, it is normal. I don't think that the strength of the opposition is in unity. We have different situations, different countries of the world, and my principle and my team's principle, my friends' principle, always been united in action. If we have something to do, we will do it. And all the opposition groups today are relevant, and all the opposition group will be relevant for the situation in Belarus after Lukashenko. The West could have done a lot before even 2020. Look, because Lukashenko hasn't won any election or referendum starting from 1994. Yes, he was elected more or less democratically. Unfortunately, because we would have been better if we preserved ourselves as a parliamentary republic, which we stayed for 3 years, and unlike all other former Soviet republics. But look, in 1999, he killed all the leaders that would have been elected presidents. Viktor Gonchar, Yuri Zakharenko, former interior minister, then Gennady Karpenko, uncontested leader of the opposition, died mysteriously. I think that he was also murdered. And in 2001, he didn't win any election. Even when we have, speaking of unity, we had a united single candidate from the opposition, which was the result of the compromise, of too much compromise, because he was the weakest candidate that we ever had. So in 21, he didn't win. 2006, he didn't win. 2010, 2015, he was rejected immediately because he was not delivering. He was delivering because he had cheap oil, but people were not happy with for a couple of years, yes, but then he simply could not deliver. So the resolute measures against crimes that are perpetrated by the regime, taken by the West, you have influence not only in the United Nations, but also in International Criminal Court. All universal jurisdiction could be used, universal justice could be used against Lukashenko, especially in Europe. All measures, you know, and I think that one of the messages that I would like to offer is that we will create a next window of opportunities. I hope quite soon. We will not wait for another 10, 20 years. Be there with us. Don't wait for some kind of, you know, assessment like you did in 2020. Even in 2010, the sanctions were introduced much quicker, although the crackdown was nothing compared to 2020, when people were killed. Be there immediately, preferably even on the day when we start our activities there, because, you know, no matter how hard I try to invite EU leadership to be present on the day of election, because it will be kind of factor that could prevent violence at least. Nobody wanted to come. They didn't care much about the situation. So, believe me, any support, any solidarity gesture from the West is immediately becomes known, despite all the blocks that are now erected against the free information. Immediately become known in Belarus, and people in Belarus do appreciate this. And for me, it is clear now that domestically we could produce a very serious effort to get rid of the regime, but there are limitations. And without the help from outside, the forms of this help we can discuss further. We will not be able to succeed. It is true for not only for us, but I think my friend David again could confirm it about Venezuela, when people are courting dictators and helping dictators instead of democratic forces.
Yes, please.
My name is Griffin Phil. I'm a Hudson intern. You've spoken a number of times about the connection between Belarus and Ukraine, and I was wondering regarding sort of the connection between Belarus and Russia. Do you think it's feasible for a popular revolution or some sort of action within Belarus to overthrow the current regime as long as Putin and his successors stay in power? Or do you think that any sort of popular action within Belarus would be met with Russian troops crossing the border to suppress any revolt on the regime's behalf?
We have very smart interns at Hudson. We have very smart interns here at Hudson.
Yeah, but look, we managed to organize several uprisings and revolutions. We were not assistants, and Russia didn't interfere. I think that I'll always give one example when people speak about the fear of Kremlin's interference into internal affairs when regime will be collapsing. Baltic states joined NATO in 2004 when Putin was president in Russia. Baltic states didn't ask for permission. Baltic states were working on their accession to NATO, and I'm sure that the West was negotiating with Putin, at least Putin. There was no reaction from Kremlin at that time. It was, even Yeltsin reacted more negatively on the NATO enlargement, as they said, than Putin. So it is, stop seeing us through the fear of Kremlin's attack. This fear of Kremlin's attack led to the war in Ukraine, because the measures that should have been taken to prevent it were not taken, and Putin Versteiners were, proliferating in the world instead of the people who were helping democracy. So I think in Russia it is not reasonable to expect any popular revolt, but in Belarus you will see people on the streets, because the hatred is very strong and rejection of the regime of Lukashenko. In Russia, unfortunately, there are quite a number of people who are supporting both Putin and the war in Ukraine.
Yes, please.
Andrei, very nice to see you, and congratulations for your presentation.
Could I ask you to introduce
my name is Davis Molansky. I'm a Venezuelan exile here in the U.S. And also involved in the World Liberty Congress. I want to ask you that seems like sanctions are not working properly when the U.S., among other actors like the European Union, use it against authoritarian regimes. So what do you think, which other type of measures could be taken to put pressure on these dictatorships across the world, which is working articulated? Thank you.
Well, I still think the sanctions, but real sanctions, because I don't know about Venezuela. I know about Venezuela, because you have natural resources which are quite attractive. That's why Belarus is easier case, because nothing there, no oil and gas, no diamonds, nothing, no gold. maybe there is. So I think the real sanctions should be introduced, and loopholes should be closed. But at the same time, stop doing business with dictators. I think today, with internet, with very effective intelligence, which is using all the new technology, it is not difficult to monitor the connections of the dictators and hit them at where it hurts. Hit them at the business that they're having. An example of Venezuela, I believe, it's both. Also, drugs are playing a very significant role there. So it is a crime per se, and connected with Venezuela, it's one of the sources of the regime, and a very strong source. So I still think that the West has money, influence, leverage to deal with these issues, because it is, especially in the case of Venezuela, when I mentioned in the beginning, when you were not here, that the revolution in Belarus was not supported properly. Revolution in Iran was not supported properly. Revolution in Venezuela, and what Venezuelan authorities are now doing with the opposition leaders that could have run in the elections, but they are deprived of their possibility. It is not supported again, and again we have these advances that are given to Maduro instead of pursuing the line that could have helped the people of Venezuela. So I think it is. Let's discuss it. David is also part of the World Liberty Congress. We have to offer something. We have to. That's our job to offer some effective solutions.
Well, I'm mindful of our time, and we are near the end. And I want to say that, you know, I've known you a long time, and the tirelessness of your campaign is no less inspiring than everything that you went through personally. You know, this is one of those struggles that it's clear will go very slowly until it goes maybe, you know, very quickly.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and so let's keep the flame alive and wait for that moment and seize it. Thank you, Andrei.
Thank you. Thank you very much.